Hey, Minnesota AGED. Joe Ramstead here from Staples Motley High School, and I'm excited to share a little bit about a lesson or a little mini unit that I like to do in my natural resources class, focusing on soil formation and properties. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first started teaching here, I'm only about a year and a half in, but this was actually one of my least favorite topics to talk about just because I thought it was really boring and I didn't really enjoy this part of my college soils class. But during the Ripple program this year, I was able to take this lesson and doctor it up and make it actually one of my most favorite lessons to teach throughout the year. So I'm excited to share this with you, and hopefully you can find a way to use this either in your natural resources class or in plant science or an intro to ag class or whatnot. So how I structure this little mini unit, if you will, it's 3 or 4 days long, and you could kind of extend it to a full week if you wanted. You could cut one of the labs and do it in a couple of days if you would like as well. But I structured in 4 days in my natural resources class, and that actually worked out pretty well this year. So on the first day, we do a little bit of an exercise talking about erosion. The reason I put that in there is because I talked about erosion the day before. So it's a nice little review, but nevertheless, that's in the HyperDoc that I have available for you in the next slide, if you so choose to look at it. And then we do the pre-lab. And days 2 and 3 is just lab working class. So half of the class does the first lab, which is the edible Munsell lab, and the other half does the virtual field trip lab, which looks at the different soil orders across the world. On a little field trip activity. And then we come back on day 4 and we exchange answers. We talk about what we liked, what we maybe didn't like, what we learned, things like that, the challenges we had, and we all come together and complete a little soil legend activity. I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but if you'd like to use that, it's also in my links that I have available for you. But I wanted to focus a little bit mainly on the 2 labs that I like to incorporate in my classes, just because I feel like they're really fun. And I had never seen them before, so I'm really excited to share them with you, and hopefully they can be useful in your curriculum or your classes. So the first link that I have over on the left over here is a lesson plan and HyperDoc. And normally I'm not a big fan of writing out full out lesson plans. I just like to kind of go with the flow. But for Ripple, we actually wrote out lesson plans, and I found that was super helpful for me, at least with this activity, because there's a lot of moving parts. So feel free to check that out, especially if your admin likes to have lesson plans turned in with things. Feel free to use that. And then I have the 2 labs here. So the first one that we're going to look at is my personal favorite because I like food, and it's the edible Munsell lab. And this lab basically looks at soil color, right? The Munsell color system is something that we all probably have heard about, whether we teach about it in our natural resources class or we learned about it in our college soil science classes. It's a pretty common thing within soil science, but I don't really like to spend a lot of time formally teaching about it. So I actually have kids learn about it through an inquiry-based activity, which involves food. So I have them do this little short pre-lab exercise the day before they do the lab on that day 1. And they basically answer these questions and read the article and answer the questions in this table. And then we'll talk about it as a class, and I'll give every kid an approval stamp just to make sure they're on the right track. Then the fun part comes in with the lab. So the day before, I go ahead to Walmart or the store in town and get pudding. I get like a variety of puddings too, like chocolate, vanilla, butterscotch, lemon, you name it. Whipped cream, food dye, sometimes milk or Oreos, etc. Some of these things I have laying around left over from our Soil Horizons lab. So you may find yourself just reusing some of those as well if you do that within your soils unit. But I have kids basically go ahead and create a bright, dull, and mottled colored soil using the Munsell color system. And they utilize different combinations of the pudding, the food dye, whatever materials I have there to create these different colored soil profiles. And then they go ahead and they tell me what Munsell color code is represented by their bright, dull, and mottled soils. It's pretty fun because up here in Staples, obviously we have a lot of diversity in our soil, but not a ton, obviously. So it's kind of cool just for kids to mix around different edible concoctions and then use the Munsell color system to look at different colors and compare them with their classmates. Then I have some post-lab questions here as well. And then the last thing I wanted to show just real briefly, and you can explore this a little bit more on your own, is the virtual field trip lab. And basically how this works is I have the different soil orders around the room on QR codes, and the kids go around and they scan them and they learn a little bit more about the soil orders and how they were formed and the different properties, physical and chemical, of each of them. My natural resources class counts as chemistry, so I like to incorporate as much chemistry as often as I can, especially in soils, because that's a pretty easy fit. And I also have it formatted for distance learners, and I had a couple distance learners this semester in my natural resources class, and this actually worked out pretty well for them at home as well. Along with the Munsell lab, they were actually able to do at home with stuff they had at home. So all of this stuff can actually be done pretty easily, either in the classroom or obviously remotely. But if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. My email and my phone number is there. Hopefully you can utilize this in your program, and thanks for watching.